Fios is not cable. We're wired differently, which means you can get the fastest internet available with equal upload and download speeds from 50 to 500 megs. So you can upload 200 photos before your favorite song is finished. Click the ad and switch to Fios today to get our best offer ever.
This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good morning, Dodge. Before we look at the week ahead, shall we reflect on the erratic week we've just had, that broad sell-off we saw after Mario Draghi kept some powder dry at the ECB meeting? What's your analysis of the ECB's decision and also the ensuing market reaction?
Well, good morning, Melissa. Actually, the ECB and the financial markets were badly out of sync last week. Some damage has actually been done by this communications blip. It's unfortunate. Almost all professional ECB watchers were wrong-footed by the turn of events. When you get beyond that, though, if you take a look at what really happened, the ECB has, in fact, delivered a further, yes, albeit fairly small, monetary easing in response to lower inflation. But more important, Draghi has now said very decisively that there is no limit on the use of the ECB balance sheet, should that be needed to prevent deflation. So he underdelivered, but the promise of the future will be to support what he is trying to accomplish.
But do you think that Draghi lost some credibility, especially after he famously said that he'll do whatever it takes?
Yes, he did. When he stepped up the aggressiveness of his language back on November 20th, he must have been fully aware he was ramping up expectations of a major easing in December. This was a culmination of a series of very dovish, uber dovish speeches that have been successfully greater effects on the markets. Such a skilled operator as Draghi does not do this by accident. Now, yes, there potentially was an overhyping of the ECB's recent guidance. That may be true to some extent, but it is undeniable that the actual measures announced last week fell far short of Mr. Draghi's often stated desire to buy an insurance policy to protect against downside risk to inflation and inflation expectations in the next 2 years. So his non-delivery really does weaken the power of his future words, but the power of his existing words is enough to give the market what it needs.
Dodge, why do you think he did that? Why do you think he raised expectations, perhaps even intentionally, to such a level?
Well, I think there's been a change in the expectations of the future. I think what's happened now, the downside risks from China have fallen. It's become clearer that the Chinese economy is, in fact, stabilizing. No, it's not growing quite yet, but at least it's stabilizing. That's a big transition. The authorities are not contemplating a major devaluation of the renminbi. Growth in economic activity in the Eurozone itself has actually picked up to around 2.5%. That's not bad, in defiance of what pessimists were predicting. And worldwide, Melissa, the risk of a financial shock, the real risk has dropped as market turbulence has declined. All this is, in fact, true. The ECB did deliver less than expected, but maybe it was because less is needed, or at least the expectations is that less is needed, and so therefore he's keeping his powder dry. Yes, I agree that my perception is a very benevolent reaction to what has happened, but we're beginning to see, globally, GDP convergence 2016, we see slightly lower U.S. growth, better Eurozone growth, stabilizing China, emerging markets, so perhaps he didn't really need to deliver all that he thought he needed previously.
How much do you think of that decision was influenced by the Fed's coming rate hike? By holding back a bit, the ECB actually gave room for the Fed and it prevented too rapid a divergence between the two central banks.
I think to the extent that Draghi understands that it is highly likely now that the U.S. will start the increase, added to his the reason for under-delivering what he had previously implied to the world. But I don't think it was the main thing. I do think that there is a perception that the risk to the downside is beginning to lessen as time goes on, and there is progress, albeit slow, And in some places, such as China, it's not that progress is really ramping up to the upside, but progress to the downside has stopped. So I think that has helped the underdelivery.
And while we're speaking about the U.S., can you help us dissect Friday's jobs report? Is the U.S. jobs market as solid as some are claiming it to be?
Well, employers are, in fact, filling an additional 211,000 positions, and yes, there will be more job openings in 2016. All that is true. We do look for payrolls to continue to expand further next year, but more like 190,000 jobs per month rather than 2015's 209,000. There is a slight downshift, and what is really of concern, and this is where it is unclear, the rate, our unemployment rate is closer to 10% when you include discouraged and underemployed. And the impact of the discouraged and underemployed not being in the market is felt more away from just the numbers, or there is other social impact that we will see over here. But that is really what belies the strength or the actual weakness in our employment figures. But for now, the Fed is on a process to try to increase demand, and in so doing, and also increasing payroll. By doing that, we may be able to attract the discouraged and unemployed to come back, and that 10% that is in real starts to weaken that 4.10% that we're looking at for the future. And so, therefore, I think that's really going to be one of the goals of the Fed, to try to get those who are not looking for jobs to begin to look for jobs as it gets harder to fill jobs.
Okay, all right. So that's a number that we should be keeping a close eye on. The other number that stood out to me was the manufacturing jobs, which are among the most exposed to the global economy. Actually, it fell by 1,000. This is the third drop in the last 4 months. Do you think that external headwinds could be the main obstacle to U.S. growth, and are policymakers factoring all this in?
Well, I don't think they're factoring it all in completely, and yes, there's a lot of external pressure. But you have to, when you take a look at factory works, these jobs are really being replaced by increased automation, and that is going to be a greater impact than any particular job increase or job weakness with regard to employment. I think that the transition of manufacturing is going to affect the negative impact of automation will be on the growth of jobs, and that is part of the weakness that we're seeing in manufacturing.
Thanks so much for speaking with us. That was DodgeDorland, Chief Investment Officer of Landor&Fuest Capital Managers, New York.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.
This year, I will chew 117 number 2 pencils.
I will doodle 9 Staples notebooks to death.
When it comes to school supplies, it's guaranteed your kids will go through a lot.
I'll make a whole lot of paper airplanes.
I will lose my backpack.
That's why you get guaranteed savings for back to school at Staples.
I'll give away my last pen to Nathan in math class.
Get guaranteed savings at Staples, and right now, one subject notebooks for just a penny with a $5 purchase. Staples, that was easy. Valid on select SKUs while supplies last. Limit 6.